Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Olson, and today I'm sharing with you an interview that I did with Brad Kearns, who is host of the Primal Endurance podcast. I'm going to be posting this interview to both Paleo Runner podcast and my new podcast, Low Mileage Running. And you can find Low Mileage Running podcast by searching iTunes or going to lowmileagerunning.com. You'll find links to the podcast. And the new podcast is going to be focused primarily on training using a lower volume approach. There's also a video feed to that podcast, and you can subscribe to that through iTunes, or you can check out it on YouTube. So this interview is done with Brad Kearns, and we go over a lot of the topics in the book, and I hope it gives you a better idea of what the book is all about and if it would bring value to you. The book has recently been released on Audible, and so you can listen to the book. It's about 36 minutes long. Actually, it's exactly 36 minutes. And it's a quick listen. Listen to it on one of your runs and leave me a review. That would really help me out. I'd like to hear your feedback. And it also helps me out with sales. Getting those reviews helps out a lot and allows other people to get value from the book as well. The book is out on Amazon as well as print. Amazon Kindle as well as print. You can find out more about the book by going to lowmileagerunning.com and subscribing to the podcast, Low Mileage Running, or checking out the YouTube channel. So up next is my interview with Brad Kearns of Primal Endurance Podcast. I hope you like it.
Welcome, listeners. This is host Brad Kearns with a very special guest. And you might recognize his name, Aaron Olson, because he has his own super awesome, very popular podcast called Paleo Runner. I've listened to many shows, and he's got his finger right on the cutting edge of everything that's going on, not only in the endurance scene, but also the wonderful blending of the paleo scene with the endurance running scene. So how are you, Aaron?
I'm doing great, Brad. It's great to be on the show.
And we're talking to you from backwoods, Minnesota or something? Where do you live?
White Bear Lake, Minnesota.
White Bear Lake, isn't that where Head Wheels originated?
I'm not sure about that.
Come on, man, get your phone book out. I think that's where Steve Head and his whole operation originated, and back in the '80s. But oh, wow. White Bear Lake sounds nice and natural and rural.
It's not too rural. It's a suburb of Twin Cities, which is St. Paul and Minneapolis.
Well, I know you have an exciting new book out with a very compelling title, and we want to talk about that and also talk about some of your podcasting efforts. But tell us about your new book.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Low Mileage Running, a short guide to running faster, injury-free. And, over the years, I had discovered that to start out with, I had tons of injuries in the past. And over the past 3 to 4 years, I really started dropping down my mileage and seeing if I could run the same speeds with less volume in my running. And what I found was that I was able to run just as fast and even faster at times by basically cutting out a lot of the junk mileage, but keeping my quality workouts really high and very intense, giving my body plenty of recovery in between those workouts. And I was able to keep my same speed and in some cases get faster and completely eliminate my injuries. And I had done some searching on Amazon and online of other people who had tried this, and I didn't see a lot of books out there. There's a few books on low volume training, but I thought, why not put this in a book format and share it with other people and let them know what I'm doing?
Interesting, especially about the injuries, because most often we read, and I'm not saying I agree with it or that it's even right, but you often read that, it's the intensity that leads to the injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear that a lot. And that could be true. I'm not sure. In my case, that hasn't been the case because I've kept the intensity high. I do 1 to 2 quality workouts per week, which are very specific and based on whatever race I'm trying to perform for. And so I've kept my quality very high because I want to be able to race on the weekends. I want to be able to stay sort of near the front of the pack. And that's fun for me. And so I thought, well, if I just go easy, I'm not going to be able to remain competitive. But what if I kept my quality workouts, kept those tempo runs, those time trials, those interval sessions, but really scaled back on the other workouts and kind of more like a hunter gatherer would, where you go out for a really intense hunt, and then you come back and you rest for a couple days. You eat your kill. You don't go out and you hunt the mammoth every day for long periods of time. You go hard and then you rest. And I took that approach to my training, and it's really paid off dividends. For example, on a higher mileage approach where I was running 50 to 60 miles per week, I ran a 1:18 half marathon, which I was happy with. But taking a lower mileage approach where I'm running around 20 to 25 miles per week, I ran a 1:17 half marathon. So, it's been very beneficial to me. I haven't had any injuries except for this past winter. I was out most of the winter because I had a water skiing injury in the fall. But other than that, for the past 4 years, I've been injury free, and it's actually just been a lot more fun to train this way as well.
So when you were struggling with injuries before and putting in that high mileage, were you also doing your tempo and intensity workouts in the midst of that high mileage week?
Yeah, like a lot of runners, I have a addictive personality. I'm a little bit OCD, and I would follow, say, something like the Jack Daniels training plan, where I had to do 3 quality workouts per week: my long run, my tempo run, my intervals. In addition to that, I was told the best way to get fitter in the long run is to keep increasing your volume, keep increasing your mileage. And so I would track my miles very closely. This week I'm doing 40, and then using the 10% rule, keep trying to increase your mileage for that long-term goal of increasing your mitochondrial efficiency and things like that. And what I found was, yeah, that worked. That would work for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. And then I'd get another injury. I'd get a stress fracture. I'd get Achilles tendonitis. And then be set back to square one again. And what I found with the new approach that focuses primarily just on those quality workouts is I can still reach those peak levels, but I have a lot more time, and I don't have to deal with the injuries anymore.
Yeah, so it sounds like the secret is coming from that increased rest. We know that intensity works, and of course, you have to, put in some hard work to be able to sustain. That's a 6 minute mile pace, right, for 117. So
Right.
you got to be approximating that at some of your workouts and hitting that speed and faster, I suppose. But now you're talking about putting in off days where you're protecting your immune system and your muscles and joints from breakdown.
Exactly. And that's just been a huge boon for me. I can still have a lot of fun, hit those high quality workouts, because that's where a lot of the fun in training comes in for me, is testing myself, and going out there and hitting those time trials or those tempo runs and seeing how I can do under different weather conditions or under different humidity, or even I'll take some time trials on trails and things like that over hills. And but then after that, the key is a lot of runners focus only on the high intensity, and a lot of times they'll do too many of these high intense or quality workouts per week. And I've found that really a key to it is really listening to your body and respecting it and giving it the recovery that it needs. Sometimes I'll only do 1 quality workout per week if I have a lot of stress in my life at that time, and other times I'll do 2. I've found that doing more than 2 quality workouts for me is too much, but you really need to listen to your body and not follow some rigid schedule that you've planned out months in advance. I've found a much more intuitive approach has been very beneficial to me, and it's just made training a lot more fun. And I just really wanted to share that with other people. It's not a one size fits all program, but if you read the book, or you can download it on Amazon with your Kindle or print. You can also listen to the book. It's a shorter book, but I just have some of the basic guidelines that I've used in my training to sort of hit some of these peak performances and still have fun at the same time.
So an experienced runner like yourself, who has that history of high mileage and has worked really hard and is now obtaining benefits from reducing the training load and keeping the intensity there. What about a novice runner who doesn't have years of base under them? Do you address? Is there any different approach they might follow, or are we doing the same template where they're I guess emphasizing more intensity and not worrying about the consistency and the mileage?
It's pretty much the same template. I've worked with runners who are just starting out, runners who just want to run a 5K with their wife and kids. And I've used the same template with them. For them, it's a much lower volume. So someone just starting out, I might have running 7 to 10 miles per week, where they're doing, say, one quality session might be a 1 mile time trial. Then come back a couple days later, and I'll have them do maybe 4 to 6 half-mile intervals if they're training for a 5K, with a 1 to 2 minute walk break in between, and then on the in between days, they'll be doing cross training, maybe just some 20-minute walk or jog, and just taking it easy. And then we'll come back and revisit those quality workouts or some similar workouts to that the next week, and it's worked very well so far. Yeah, so it's really just scaling it back for depending on your level. Now, some of the criticism I've heard is that, well, you've had this long period of running the higher mileage through high school and college, and to that I would say I don't think the high mileage, the past high mileage, really helped that much, because I would train hard for 8 weeks, and then I'd be sidelined with an injury for 4 weeks. So I'm not sure how much of that really remains in my legs, because I was injured so often that I don't know how much benefit it really gave me. And the idea that it could still stick with me to this day, I think any runner who's been injured for 4 weeks, you go out and you haven't been running for 4 weeks, it's almost like you're back at square one. So I know some people have said that, but I'm very skeptical that any of that fitness from running the 50 to 60 mile weeks is still with me.
Well, even so, if you're a novice runner and you don't have the substantial fitness base starting out, then your high intensity workout is not going to look as impressive as an experienced runner. And like you say, doing a 1 mile time trial could be a sufficient place to start from for maybe that's the only speed workout they do the entire week as they're building up their running fitness, and maybe that time on the stopwatch is not too impressive by outside observer standards, but it's hard for that person, and it's developing those those anaerobic muscle fibers that will be used when they're doing high speed racing.
Yeah, exactly. I was on a podcast called Back of Pack Endurance a few weeks ago, and these are guys who are a bit heavier and stockier, and they typically finish towards the back of the race. And they asked me how would this work for a bigger person or someone just starting out, like you said. And I told them, for someone starting out, high intensity quality work could even be like a walk jog. So you might run that 1 mile time trial or those half-mile intervals at a 12-minute pace, or 14-minute pace even, which is almost a walk. But for that person, that's very high quality work. And the key is to keep revisiting those workouts. Maybe not every week, but on a regular basis. Keep coming back to those workouts. Keep testing yourself. And I found a key for myself is training what Tim Noakes calls the central governor. And that's training your mind and body to accept higher levels of discomfort. It's not all just about training the physiology, is what I found. If I can do a workout that gives me the confidence that says, yeah, I can run this half marathon or marathon at a certain pace, and if I feel that I can do it, I can usually do it. But if I haven't put in those quality workouts and I haven't given myself that confidence, then I'm probably going to be suffering on race day, not because of the physiology, but because I haven't trained my brain to really give it the confidence to accept high levels of discomfort.
So are your sessions calibrated to the pace that you want to run in your goal race? So if you're trying to do 6-minute miles for a half marathon, is there some application? And I don't know, do you describe this in the book for someone that's, shooting for a certain goal pace, how they would do that with an intense training session?
Yeah. In the book, I recommend running almost all of your quality workouts as fast as possible. And that's going to come to a shock to some people. But how are you going to know what your goal pace is going to be if you don't test yourself on a regular basis? So in training for a half marathon, one of my favorite quality workouts is to do an 8 to 10 mile time trial. And I don't go out with a preconceived notion of what I should do, because it's going to depend on the humidity, on the heat, on how many hills are on that course. I just go out and I say, today I'm going to run as fast as I can, and I'm going to push my central governor and tell it that you're going to accept higher levels of pain. Whatever that pain for that day is, that's okay, because conditions can vary quite a bit. But practice testing yourself and pushing yourself to new limits. And some people might think, well, that could lead to injury because you're pushing so hard. But the key is take those easy recovery days really easy. Go for a walk. Go for a slow jog for 20 to 30 minutes. And by pushing yourself very hard, but then backing off, you get a lot of the benefits, but with none of the injury. So it's kind of that 80-20 approach taken to your running that I see very helpful.
Well, I'm totally supportive of making higher highs and lower lows in your training pattern, because I feel like the biggest mistake that the masses make is that striving for consistency. For some reason, it's been battered into the brain of the endurance community that you need to hit blank miles per week, and the conversations and the lingo that we use about why does the week come up as a reference point all the time? It's an arbitrary time standard of 7 days, which means nothing to the dynamic process of getting fit. So, a couple things you mentioned about being more intuitive and letting yourself have those easy days where there's no pressure or preconceived schedule assigning you to run this many miles, could unlock greater performance potential on those days when you feel great, your central governor's ready to go, and you want to do a time trial and really push yourself to a high level.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the benefits of taking a more relaxed approach to your training, is that you can calibrate your workouts depending on how you're feeling. Last week I had planned on doing I'm training for Twin Cities Marathon, and I was going to do a 13 to 15 mile run. And that day I just wasn't feeling it. I got to about mile 6 and my legs for some reason just felt dead. And so I said, you know what, screw this workout. I'm going to come back and revisit this in a couple days. And I came back a couple days later and I just killed the workout. So I have found that taking an intuitive approach is going to save you from injuries, but it's also going to let you reach those higher levels of performance. And after that workout, I had one of the best runner's highs that I've had in a while. So for me, that's what it's about, is flirting with these sort of extreme limits of performance. Obviously, I'm not an elite athlete or anything, but for me, that workout last week, I hit it hard and I felt great, and that was sort of a limit experience for me.
So tell us about your podcasting efforts. How long you've been doing it, and what's the nature of the show and so forth?
Yeah, I started Paleo Runner podcast back in 2012, I believe, and I had gotten really interested in the paleo diet because I had suffered with irritable bowel syndrome for most of my life. And tried the paleo diet because I heard that it could help with things like that. And it was just like within 2 weeks, I was normal again. And I couldn't believe how quickly the paleo diet switched around my gut. And I had gone to doctors before and asked them, what's wrong with me? I've got this irritable bowel syndrome. I'm going to the bathroom 10 times a day. And they just said it has nothing to do with the food you're eating. Nothing's wrong. You're just stressed. You have anxiety, something like that. But finally, at the age of 29, I found the paleo diet, and it just totally changed my life around, really, and my running as well. Because if you've got irritable bowel syndrome when you're on a run, it's not going to be a good thing. So I decided to start a podcast and interview the experts about it, and then it's just kind of taken a life of its own. I've talked with Tim Noakes, Lauren Cordain, Mark Sisson, a lot of the big names in the paleo arena, and it's just been a lot of fun to share those conversations with other people.
So what do you think about the blending of paleo and endurance community? I mean, do you see some trends happening where, I mean, we're talking about a carbohydrate dependency scene here where the athletes have put in so many weekly hours of training, oftentimes chronic pattern training, and that type of behavior pretty much has to be fueled by carbohydrate. So it's a little bit of a uneasy match. But as we know from being deep into it, and the low carb and the ketogenic athletes are doing extraordinary things out on the fringes. But what do you think about the overall patterns, like when you show up at the Twin Cities Marathon?
Well, I would have the overall pattern is I would say that I've dabbled with the ketogenic approach, and that was not working for me at all. I think that I hear from a lot of people that try that, and then they end up going back and adding some carbs back, some safe carbs like sweet potatoes or white rice or even white potatoes. And for me, that's really worked well, is adding back in some of those safe starches. I eat lots of fat, healthy saturated fats and things like that, but I also get a good mix of carbohydrates in there as well. So I think that I get a little worried when I hear people cutting out carbs completely, because as Paul Jaminet says, carbs can be used for extracellular matrix in your body. They can be used. We have over 2,000 glycoproteins in our bodies, which go to make things like cartilage and other extracellular matrix in our body. So I've found that a range of around 150 grams of carbs a day is a good spot for me, but I don't monitor it too closely. What have you found, Brad, with going too low of carb? Is that working for you?
Well, one interesting thing that comes up is obviously it's highly individual. So we're taking the position in our upcoming book, Primal Endurance, that I think the first question that anyone should ask when they're delving into this dilemma of what's the optimal amount of carb intake to fuel my endurance training, allow me to recover and perform, and also promote health and escape those negative aspects of a pro-inflammatory, oxidative damage diet of high carb consumption. The first question would be, how's your body composition? Do you carry any excess body fat? And it seems like there's a large number of endurance athletes who are putting in many, many hours of weekly training, and by all means should be, Rip City with that kind of devotion to exercise and burning that many calories, but they're carrying excess body fat largely due to their dietary habits. So I think a starting point there is to say, what's your body composition like? How far away are you from your goal? And until you reach that goal, it's got to be known, it's got to be admitted by all that the path to that goal is restricting carbohydrates so you can access fat burning, moderate insulin and access fat burning. But once you get into that comfortable body composition range, then it becomes a question of personal preference and seeing that you're making sure you're recovering from your workouts optimally. But what do you think about putting that starting point out there as how's your body composition?
I'm not completely sure about that. I think that could be a good place to start. Another aspect I worry about is the gut microflora, because our gut is also nourished, the mucosal lining, by carbohydrates. So I would like to see people not cut back to zero. I know Tim Noakes is a big fan of cutting way back to around 25 grams a day, but I would guess people who are overweight are probably in the 400 to 500 grams a day of carbohydrates. So I would say cut back and try it, see how you feel, see how your body's responding. And if it responds good, then keep going with it. But I get a little bit leery when someone goes to extremes, just based on my experience. I had I had never had bad leg cramps or anything like that. I had, when I went with the ketogenic approach, I just had some other problems that people probably don't want to hear about on here, as far as like constipation and things like that. So, which I think was due to the lack of mucosal, the gut flora being diminished in my gut from the low carb approach. But I'd say listen to your body. That's the key here. Try cutting back, see how you feel.
It's hard to argue with that. And you mentioned Paul Jaminet's term safe starches, and I think that's important to reflect on when we're talking about tweaking carb intake. I think the major attention should be paid to high nutrient value carbs, and I don't think anyone has any justification for consuming sugar and refined grains and those packaged snack foods and products that are laden with other offensive ingredients. But then if you're talking about eating all kinds of nutritious carbs, and I've been starting to make these super high power vegetable smoothies every morning. So I imagine that my daily carbohydrate intake has risen substantially since I started this new habit. But it's hard to argue with, consuming more vegetables being anything but a positive.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
But like you said, if anyone's looking for an out, because Aaron Olson says, don't take your carbs down too low, and you're pounding, those gels when you're at work, when you've got an afternoon lull or whatever. That's a little different story than focusing on a high nutrient value diet with abundant intake of vegetables and selective fruits and good highly nutritious carbs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how do you pick your guests for the show and strategize the topics to talk about? Do you get a lot of listener feedback and so forth?
I pick every once in a while I'll get an email from someone saying, "Hey, I've got this new book out or something and it'd be great to talk with you on the show." But a lot of times I don't respond to those because I'm not doing it for profit or anything like that or to help people out. I'm doing it because I'm interested in what you have to say. I've read the book and I think it's fascinating and I want to have you on the show, so I'll reach out to them. So it's just kind of whatever books I've been reading lately, I'll get in touch with the author and ask them if they want to come on the show. I've had one of the interesting guests on who really isn't into the paleo eating, but he's into more of paleo running, was Daniel Lieberman, and he had a lot of interesting research about barefoot running. And so it's not just about diet; it's about the whole paleo lifestyle. And we get on the call and try to have an interesting conversation, and then I put it up online.
It sounds pretty fun, man.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So when did you finish this book? How long's it been out?
I finished the book about a month ago, and I self-published it to Amazon Kindle. That was a great experience. It's fun that this day and age, you don't have to use a publisher or ask someone if it's okay to publish a book. I had some ideas that I thought would help other people, and I put it out there, packaged it in a book. I wrote it with something called Leanpub, and I put it online, and the response has been great. The first day it was up, it was in the number 4 in the running and jogging category on Amazon, and I've heard feedback from people that saying that they really enjoyed it. So, yeah, why not share ideas? Don't keep them all to yourself.
Yeah, welcome to the modern world. Getting the word out and mixing in with all the people that'll give you good feedback and keep progressing, especially progressing away from the dated notions and approaches that for some reason still linger around today, like that obsessive mileage approach for the runners, and you telling your story of getting injured and awakening to a different approach, and then putting up some times, which is really impressive. Not only that they're very fast, but that you were able to improve your time with a smarter and more strategic approach to training. That's hard to argue with.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm interested for you and Mark's book to come out soon. Can you tell us a little bit what is your guys' approach to the overall volume conundrum, where if you do too much you could get injured, but it could possibly be helpful? What kind of a stance do you guys take?
Listen to Aaron. You can't help yourself, man. You go from guest to host seamlessly. That's why this podcast is going so well. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that we're trying to hit the major talking points and the major philosophical points and make a strong, convincing argument to awaken to the reality of what hasn't worked, what's extremely destructive to your health. A big concern for me, having been a competitor on the professional triathlon circuit way back when, is a lot of my peers, and now the word's coming out. There's just an article in Velo News about the dangers of long-term cardiovascular extreme training, and it's actually bad for your heart and compromising to your health to push yourself at that level that we've always associated with, being the fittest guy on the block and you know, the the stud triathlete that can go out and do an Ironman or run a marathon. And if it's not done properly, and if the dietary habits don't fall in line with, highly nutritious, high nutrient value diet, you're going to compromise your health in pursuit of these hallowed fitness goals. So I think that's kind of a starting point for people to have to admit that there's no there's no panacea here against health destruction just because you're putting in the work every day. And in fact, it could be the opposite. But when it comes to training, I was going to ask you too, like, do you have any, is there any place where periodization affects this low mileage running strategy, such as an off season where you're just taking it easy, or other times where you are putting in more volume, that kind of thing?
That's one thing that I haven't completely figured out. During the winters here in Minnesota, there's a lot of snow on the ground, so I basically take that opportunity to focus more on my speed. I'm doing a lot of indoor workouts on the treadmill during the winter, so I'll focus more towards the 5K. And then as the snow starts to melt, I'll start to put in some of those longer miles, a little bit longer quality workouts, and things like that. And that has worked good for me. But I haven't totally figured out the periodization approach, or even if that's necessary. One of the things for me is I like to keep a high level of fitness year round. So maybe I'm at 95% of my fitness capacity, but I'm able to keep it up year round. And for me, that's a positive trade-off. Even if I can't maybe get 100% out of some peak race, I'm not an elite athlete. I'm just in it for the fun. So if I can hit 95% and maintain good fitness year round, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think Phil Maffetone says the same thing, that there's no reason why you can't peak multiple times, and all this nonsense about these ultra long buildups to one peak race. I would put that in the flawed notion category as well, because anytime, and that's a recipe for overtraining, is to say, well, I'm entered in the Twin Cities Marathon in 14 weeks time, so I'm going to do this crazy 14-week build and be in top shape. You're more likely to get injured before you hit the starting line. Whereas if you just have sort of a measured approach where you're not overdoing it, you're not overloading yourself with, oh, it's my high mileage fade, so I'm going to slam myself for the next 4 to 6 weeks straight. Those kind of things are what the old timers practiced, and it didn't succeed very well. And now we're in a situation where, just with some fine tuning, you can leverage that healthy state of being a healthy endurance athlete, which isn't always the case. A lot of times there's overworked, overstressed, overly hectic endurance athlete. But if you're healthy, then you can always tap into good peak performance, even if you haven't trained perfectly for the previous 6 weeks leading up to your event.
Yeah. I think that's a great approach, especially when you're not racing for the money, or at least most people listening to this aren't. And so it also allows you to get in some other fun races during your training. So leading up to this marathon, I'm going to be doing some 10Ks and some half marathons. And if something does end up happening and I, for some reason, do get an injury before the marathon, I've still been able to have fun along the way and enjoy the process. And I even have a chapter in my book called Race Your Way into Shape. And I think that racing is one of the best ways of training. Our hunter-gatherers weren't out there practicing to hunt. They just did the hunt, and that was their training. And so I think you can use races as part of your training. If you're training for, say, a marathon or half marathon, gradually build up your races, do a 5K, 10K, and then try a half. And that sort of training can be a lot of fun because you're around other people as well.
Right. And it also might, you might respect it more, so that you actually rest before you deliver a race performance, and you might recover better afterwards with the pride and satisfaction that you actually, got another number to pin on the wall, and really gave it a peak performance effort, inspired by your competitors out there. Where a lot of times I hear people say, here's my hard workout, but I'm just training through this. I did a pretty hard thing yesterday, and this weekend we're going long again, and that's kind of like it's it's sort of a I believe it fosters some negative habit patterns of just thinking that you can you can go to the well on a whim rather than have a high respect for those times when you're delivering a peak performance effort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Having that respect for the race is important, and knowing that it's gonna hurt, and you should rest up a couple days before. I think it might encourage you to take a more relaxed approach prior to the race, like you said as well.
Well, it sounds like good stuff, Aaron, and I'm happy to tell the listeners to go over to Amazon and check out Low Mileage Running, a short guide to running faster and injury free. Now, you put the word short in there. Is that because do you have a lot of friends that don't read like me, or what?
Well, I don't read that much. I listen to most of my books on Audible.
Oh,
And
cool.
so
Yeah.
I thought, I don't more running, less reading. That's my motto. So more having fun, less reading. You can listen to the audiobook. It's a 36-minute book. It's $4 to download. You can
Nice.
download the Kindle book and read it in a half hour. So you get the basics, and you'll be able to go out there and start setting PRs.
Aaron Olson from Low Mileage Running and the Paleo Runner Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the Primal Endurance Podcast, and look forward to more of your great shows on your channel. Have a great day, and good luck in your upcoming marathon, Aaron.
Thanks, Brad.
All right. Thank you, listeners. It's your host, Brad Kearns. Until next time, thanks for listening to the Primal Endurance Podcast.